You have been chosen for something that requires more than talent, more than intelligence, more than the kind of strength that shows up easily in comfortable conditions. What you have been called to carry requires a specific interior formation, the kind that only develops through seasons that demand everything from you and offer very little back in return. And that is exactly the kind of season you have been in. The choosing was not random. It never is. When God selects someone for a specific purpose, the selection is always followed by a preparation. And the preparation is almost never what the person selected would have designed for themselves. It involves wilderness. It involves stripping away. It involves the long and uncomfortable process of having everything that cannot sustain the calling removed, gently when possible, forcefully when necessary, until what remains is only what is genuinely capable of carrying what is being given. You have been in that process, and it has been costing you in ways that are real and significant and deserve to be named honestly. The isolation that came without clear explanation, the plans that dissolved before they could be realized, the sense of being on the outside of something everyone else seemed to be inside of, the prayers that felt like they dissolved into silence, the version of yourself you kept trying to maintain while something underneath was quietly being rebuilt into something the old version could not have held. None of that was accidental. All of it was intentional. Not cruel, intentional. There is a difference. Cruelty removes for the sake of removal. Preparation removes for the sake of what is coming. And what is coming into your life required the specific removal of everything that could not sustain it. There is a pattern in the lives of people God has used significantly that is worth examining carefully, because it runs directly counter to what the world would recommend as the path to significance. Before the public assignment, there is always the private wilderness. Before the elevated platform, there is always the hidden season. Before the multiplication of what a person carries, there is always the contraction, the reduction, the stripping, the period where everything external diminishes so that something internal can be built that the external will eventually rest on. Moses in the desert for 40 years, David in the caves, Joseph in the pit and then the prison, John the Baptist in the wilderness, Jesus himself in 40 days of isolation and testing before his public ministry began. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. It is the signature of a preparation method that prioritizes interior formation over external positioning. Because external positioning without interior formation produces influence that cannot be sustained. It collapses under the weight of what it was never built to carry. The wilderness you have been in is not the opposite of the assignment. It is the first chapter of it. If these words are reaching you when you needed them, the best thing you can do is subscribe so they can keep finding you. This channel exists for exactly these moments. Being chosen comes with a specific burden that people outside the experience rarely understand. It is not the burden of the assignment itself. That burden arrives later, and it comes with the grace to carry it. The burden of being chosen is the burden of the in-between. The gap between the awareness that something significant has been placed on your life and the arrival of the moment when that something becomes visible. Living in that gap is one of the more demanding human experiences available, because it requires a quality of trust that has nothing external to rest on. The promise is real. The fulfillment has not yet arrived. And the space between those two realities is where the most essential formation happens. In that space, every lesser motivation gets burned away. Every ambition rooted in ego, rather than calling, gets exposed and removed. Every attachment to outcome over obedience gets identified and released. The person who emerges from that in-between is not carrying the calling for what it can do for them. They are carrying it because they are willing, genuinely, completely, at whatever cost, to be available for what it requires. That willingness is being built in you right now. In the very difficulty you would prefer to be through. The in-between is not wasted time. It is the most productive time of your formation. The enemy of what is on your life is not primarily the opposition you encounter externally. Opposition from the outside can be endured. It can be moved through. The more dangerous opposition is internal, the doubt that convinces you that what was placed on your life has been rescinded, the weariness that whispers that the promise was misread or misheard, the comparison that looks at other people's visible fruitfulness and concludes that yours has been indefinitely deferred. These internal voices are not truth. They are the inevitable pressure of a long formation season, and they do not reflect the actual status of what has been placed on your life. The calling does not waver when you waver. The assignment does not disappear when your confidence in it does. God does not revise the plan downward every time you struggle to believe in it. The plan was written with full knowledge of your weakness and your doubt and your tendency to lose the thread in hard seasons. It was not written for a stronger version of you. It was written for exactly you, the actual struggling, sometimes barely holding on you, and it has not changed. There is something worth understanding about the specific way that chosen people tend to be tested. The testing almost always focuses on the very area in which the calling will eventually operate. If the calling involves leadership, the testing will involve seasons of being under unjust authority. If the calling involves faith, the testing will involve extended periods of darkness where faith has nothing visible to attach to. If the calling involves comfort and healing, the testing will involve deep personal wounding that creates the specific empathy required to reach others at that depth. The testing is not arbitrary. It is targeted. And when you understand that the area in which you have been most severely tested is likely the area in which your calling is most concentrated, the difficulty reorganizes. It is no longer evidence of random suffering. It is evidence of specific preparation. The very place where you have been most broken is being rebuilt into the very place from which you will carry the most. What the enemy intended to use to disqualify you is being used by God to prepare you. The deepest wounds are becoming the deepest wells. The link in the description is there for anyone who wants to support this work. What has been given toward it freely is what makes it possible to reach more people in more wilderness seasons. If that resonates, the door is there. There are things being developed in this season that will only make sense later. Capacities being built that have no visible application in your current circumstances, but that will be essential for what comes next. The ability to remain steady in the absence of visible confirmation. The discernment that comes from learning to hear clearly in silence. The authority that is only available to someone who has spent significant time in the place of genuine dependency, who knows from lived experience rather than theological theory what it means to have God as the only available resource. These are not qualities that can be taught. They cannot be imparted through instruction or received through imitation of someone else who has them. They can only be developed through the specific experience of being in a season where they are required. You have been in that season, and you have been developing them, even in the days when it felt like nothing was growing, even in the stretches where the only evidence of anything happening was the simple fact that you were still here, still choosing, still refusing to walk away from what you know has been placed on your life. That is not nothing. That is the whole work of the formation season. The staying, the continuing to believe despite the absence of visible evidence. The daily, quiet, unglamorous act of trusting something that has not yet been confirmed by anything you can see. The people God has used most significantly in history were not necessarily the most gifted or the most naturally equipped. They were consistently the most formed, the ones who had been through enough and stayed through enough that what was placed on their life had sufficient interior structure to rest on. The formation was never the obstacle between them and the calling. The formation was the qualification. You're being qualified, right now, in this season, through this specific difficulty. The wilderness is not the detour around the assignment. The wilderness is the beginning of it. And when it ends, and it will end, seasons always end, what steps out of it will not be the person who entered it. What steps out will be someone prepared to carry what is actually being given. Someone whose interior has been built to match the weight of the exterior assignment. Someone who knows, from having been through the formation, that what they carry was never theirs to manage in their own strength. And that knowing is the most essential qualification of all. Keep going. You were chosen before you understood what the choosing required. And the one who chose you knew exactly what this season would cost. He is still saying the same thing he said before the wilderness began. This is the one I have chosen. And I have not changed my mind.